Welcome, everyone. This is a format we are introducing in the recent FAST events. We are basically having an open discussion on some topic. Today, the topic of discussion is AI, LLM, and how basically that relates to our Smalltalk world, how we can integrate that into it or not. There are people that is for it and against it. Joining us, we have Seth Berman, CEO and President of Instantiations. I guess you know it. Yeah, the Joker. Hernan, he doesn't need introduction, I guess, but yes, he's also a very active member here. Juan is the main developer of Quiz, and is also working at LabWare now. And Guillermo is also an old Smalltalk developer. I know him from like 20 years. He's been doing at least Smalltalk. He's also the developer of website, and he's doing also some AI integration into that IDE. So we will be discussing different things. And this, again, this is an open conversation. We will have questions times as well at the end, or you can just interrupt it. I will try to allocate time slots so we don't just randomly talk about a particular topic. I have a list of topics I would like to go over. So you don't know about? Well, I told Guillermo that he can just use ChatGPT chat and just have that thing answering for him. So, and we always think of Smalltalk as a mind augmenting tool of some sort. And there is this trend, I wouldn't say hype, but because it's new, it's certainly a buzzword and everybody's talking about it, and there's a lot of money being poured into all the AI tools, but like all the big tooling for development, all those companies are investing heavily on that by using different like plugins. You have AI-driven IDEs, like they were built from the ground up using some sort of AI. JetBrains has it in the tools. You also have the most popular one from GitHub and on all that stuff from VS Code. So one of the things that I would like to start asking here is basically how you see, in particular, I will point that to Guillermo, is that how you see the AI integration can benefit the developer experience in an IDE.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much, Esteban. I have just a bit of experience in trying these tools, and my position is that it's better than nothing. As I said before yesterday, one of the things that I tried was to generate code, Smalltalk code, and I ran several benchmarks trying to measure not only the health of the code, but also how these things, sometimes I call them virtual parrots, because, yeah, essentially they never stop saying something. But the point is that they kind of recover after providing, like, there is the notion of an agent, like an implementation of more than just a model responding things. And one of the things that I tried was to, okay, generate this stuff, then I automatically try it, let's say code that passes some tests, and then if I hit some exception, then I went back to the thing and reported with great detail, and it gave me a newer version, and then iterate this way until it recovers, meaning that the test passes, there is a coverage of my code, etc. So this is the kind of things that I've been trying. But in a more general sense, I think that it's again, sometimes even when the result of these models is kind of nonsense, I think that they can add new directions, because sometimes I feel that we tend to think in a within a narrow path, and even when the answer of these models is something that makes no sense, it can add a new point of view and a new direction in our line of thoughts. So I think it would be beneficial. Of course, this is a super vague way to say it. So what is out of discussion to me is that we should pay attention as a community to these kind of tools and see how to integrate them into these our environments. Otherwise, we would be like, I don't know, showing our back to something that is, even when it is a trend. Like in the last, the interview that Gillette Braha made to Alan Kay, he mentioned that probably this is one more of events in the history of science that was exactly that. A lot of people focusing on a given topic that after it is discarded. So probably it is this one of those cases. But even so, I think that we should pay attention and see how to integrate it into our workflows.
Okay, anybody else wants to add something to that view on how you think that integrating, because LLMs is like basically like the hot topic these days, but do you see the different ways of integrating AI into our environment that actually augments our productivity, as we always have, like, we have the reputation of being highly productive with Smalltalk because of the instant feedback loop and all that stuff. And, well, other environments have been catching up. It's, at this point, we are basically lagging behind that because we are not there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I have maybe some things to add. I think there are many different ways to see this. One of them is from the marketing point of view. Like I said yesterday, our main users are developers. And for me as a professor, when I have to teach Smalltalk, I have to compete with other languages and other tools. And, you know, AI and Copilot, those tools are like the autocompletion 20 years ago. Smalltalk didn't have autocompletion. We were used to type everything. And we added autocompletion because other languages or other IDEs had it, and it was cool, it was great. It made you work faster. So if we didn't add autocompletion to Smalltalk, we would, you know, fall behind the other languages and IDs. So from that point of view, as a marketing, point of view, we need that integration with AI because we need to compete with the other tools and other languages. If not, we're going to lose. A developer that it used to have Copilot or something like that, that goes from IntelliJ to Smalltalk, will not, you know, we already know that Smalltalk is so different, so difficult to start working with. And if we add that other difference, they will say, why? I don't want to use it. Why is the need to use that? I mean, what's the, why should I use it? Another thing that we have to think positively about this change is that sometimes I ask myself why tools appear in the history of humankind. You could think that tools appears because somebody thought about, oh, let's do something. And you can also think that they appear because it's a need. It's a need of the moment, you know, when humans started to not travel anymore but stay in places, and they needed to move a lot of grains and things. They discovered the wheel, and then, you know, things started to appear because we need them. And something I see lately on students is that they don't read anymore. They don't read, they don't take time to learn, and we could say, oh, you know, these kids don't read, blah, blah, blah. Or the other way to see it is that they don't read it or they don't research because there's so much to read, so many things. 20 years ago, or when I learned Smalltalk in 1995, I think there were 200 classes in Smalltalk 5. 100. It was easy. It was easy to, you know, to know the whole library, all the method. You know, one afternoon you read the whole manual, and that was great. And now it's impossible. So maybe these tools will help, you know, new guys, new students to. It would be like somebody that knows everything and tells you what to use at the right moment. So for me, it would be great to have a tool for a student, for a newbie that is trying to do a select, but he doesn't know it, and he do a do and an if true, and it would be great for that tool to tell him, hey, you know what, you should use a select, or you can use a detect, or whatever. So in that sense, that newbie will learn about that message, and without going through the whole classes and messages and so on. So I think we have to take advantage of these new ideas, tools, and AI, and see how to make it valuable to us.
Yep.
So I would agree with all of that. And in fact, when the company look at AI, we sort of have this mantra like we're about augmenting, you know, the human endeavor, not replacing it. So we're always trying to think about ways to how AI is basically helps us in consuming information, and that's a really interesting thing. But it's subtle. I don't know if any of you guys have used Notebook LM, but it's a really good example. In Notebook LM, it's really an experiment about how there's going to be these new ways that our kids and their kids will consume and learn information. So in Notebook LM, you add a bunch of sources of information, random sources, things you generate, things other people found, and there's this button that's create podcast, and it creates a dynamically generated podcast between a male and a female, discussing and bringing together all that orthogonal information and bits and pieces that you put together, and you listen to it as a conversation. You can listen to it in the car. You can sit back and think about it. Nobody's telling you what you should do, and so this could be part of, you know, no one's telling you how to write your method, how to write your framework. It's just a new way to describe things to you that sparks new ideas. And so we see a lot of value in that, especially as we seek to really help and figure out how to best help the teams that are on these, you know, these very large systems that we support, and just being able to describe those systems, especially as you have very mature teams that maybe retire out, new ones come in, and we need to get folks up to speed. We need them to be able to think and understand about the architecture in new ways, and we need new tooling for that. Some of that is the method completion and those kinds of things, but I tend to look at, you know, bubble out a little bit and think about more holistically, you know, the complete set, the umbrella suite of things where AI could add value. And so I think right now we're in a phase where we're trying to figure out what that value is, and that's going to require some discovery. So we'll try things here and there, and we'll see where it goes. But I do see AI. It's not. There is a cloud. It's kind of a hazy cloud of hype around a core that is there and really valuable. We just got to get to it. There's just going to be a lot of stuff happening. Some of that will blow away. It's kind of like throwing 100 things at a dartboard. 99 will fall off, but there will still remain some really valuable things there that we're going to be figuring out in the next couple of years, I believe.
Yes, and adding to that is like we always, as small talkers, we are proud of how reflective our systems are. Basically, you can ask the system about the system itself. And now you have these tools that basically can do that for you without a system that is not fully reflective. And even with some, I don't know, typed languages, because they can build those vectors of information with more information, maybe a static type language or something more like live typing or some other kind of hinting, you can have the same. So how you see that vision, or how that plays with the Smalltalk, that is pure reflective language, and basically we influenced other languages to be reflective, and now you can have a tool or an agent that actually have insights of your system that maybe you don't get from the tools itself.
I would like to be a bit more explicit about the direction this is going on. It's unexpected to me, but I want to step back for a second. When LLMs started to become well known and people started using them, well, an LLM generates text. Okay, so the obvious way to use that for programming was to make it generate code. Okay, and I believe that still the common understanding of many or most people is that LLMs should be used for that, for generating code. And that possibility is something that we could consider, think about, and maybe discuss a little bit. But it's becoming clear that everyone here expects the value of LLMs and AI in general in a development environment is not so much about generating code, but about helping the developer understand a code base. I think those approaches are completely different, and it's important to be aware of that difference. And particularly, I think that in these areas where the value is most likely to be found, I agree that a larger code base, I mean, as you all said before, in Smalltalk 80, you were, it was possible, as Daningal said, for any person or for many persons to dig deep in whichever part of the system they needed and understand every bit of it, just by reading the code and using the debuggers, inspectors, all the tools, right? And as systems grow larger, the extra complexity is, of course, a big problem. So we may try to bound that complexity by modularization and by careful design, and of course we do that all the time, but still we demand more from systems, so complexity is still growing even if we try to avoid it as much as possible. So I see a likely future for forms of AI, maybe LLMs or maybe some other variation in making systems easier to understand and replace other tools like method finder, text search, of course, static typing. I mean, static typing should disappear in every language, right? Yeah, we already know that dynamic typing is better. We already know that type collection works. Hernan has shown that live typing is practical. Well, an AI may be even better than live typing because it may make some kind of smart conclusions from the collected type information. That's a place where an AI may be useful. And in general, training itself with the code in our system and similar systems may give us insight on those systems. I'm way more expecting on code generation because code generation can usually generate code that is very related to the training corpus. And our training corpus in Smalltalk in general is our Smalltalk system or other Smalltalk systems that are similar. And as Brad Cox said in No Silver Bullet in 1986, the difference between accidental complexity and fundamental complexity of the problem we are dealing with. And code generation, AI code generation tools are great at reducing the burden of accidental complexity. They create template code and repetitive tasks, and they attack that problem, but they will not solve the creative problem the creative part of solving a new problem, because that was not in the training corpus. And in Smalltalk, we are focused more on that than on the accidental complexity. So I expect code generation in Smalltalk in general to be less useful than for more verbose and template-based languages. But maybe the real value is, as I believe everyone is agreeing here, on helping developers understand.
Yeah,
the
well,
system.
I read some time ago about that you can only rely on three languages to, I mean, when you generate code using some ChatGPT or Grok or whatever. It's like Python, JavaScript, and what was the other one? There was another one that I remember. Um, but it was like the only reliable one. If you want to the LLM to generate Prolog, you maybe it's not going to be good.
Or Haskell.
Or Haskell, yeah, anything that doesn't have like a good training set is going to. And what you mentioned about the complexity and this on focusing not on writing but on understanding, which is something that Smalltalk gives us. That's why we have so complex business systems built with Smalltalk. It's like I read something again. It was like not using some kind of AI tool these days is like refusing to use Google because it works in a way that basically isn't a directory as most search engines were before. So now Google came out with an idea just to organize information in tables with thousands or millions of columns, and then that changed search basically on the web. Now we maybe have a different way to work with that. You want to add something to that?
Yes, no, I want to say that I asked ChatGPT about No Silver Bullet, and ChatGPT said that it's Fred Brooks and not, you said Brad Cox. Who said him? The author? You said Brad Cox.
Brooks is the author.
Thank you, ChatGPT. Just kidding. So anyway, yeah, it was a tiny mistake. Don't worry. Okay, no, I want to talk about the reflective thing and AI. That's an interesting idea, but I think for AI to take advantage of a reflective system, it should be able to query and understand the answer of that system. And I don't believe that's going to happen with AI. I don't know. But anyway.
You said one? Okay.
Well, I was just going to give some feedback on sort of working with code bases. I actually used AI quite like ChatGPT. I use that a lot for EMServe, which I'll be talking about a little later. But really the point isn't I don't need it to generate or tell me how to design or generate the code. But what was really useful were things like this. Here's a bunch of my code. I want you to help me generate a security policy.md based on what you're reading about my code. And it generates something. I want you to generate a template code design, .md for designers, and it's able to look at my code and extract from that how it thinks that my design patterns are and the way that I code, and it comes up with the template. And then I read that and I consume that information, and then I think about it, and then I say, well, yes, and I can see why it's saying these things, and I wonder if that is the right way to do. It's a conversation. It's a tool to help you think, and so that's how I see it. I don't see it as a tool to help me write my code necessarily, unless it's really boring stuff like FFI. So I've done that before, where I taught it tonal first, because you have to build up the context if you're going to use a big LLM like ChatGPT. So start with here's the tonal spec. Here's my here's a Git export in tonal format. Here's a bunch of my FFI bindings and extract the patterns that you see in terms of how the bindings are done. Here's C, which is really good at C because there's a lot of data behind that. Here's a C header file. Now generate me the bindings that look like these other things and describe the layout of config maps, applications. So it takes a while to get to the point where it understands, okay, I have enough context to know what you're kind of after. So after I generated, I think it was Redis or something small. I just wanted to see how it would work. It actually would call it 80%, which wasn't bad. I mean, it's a big giant LLM. You had to give it a lot of context, but 80%. laborious work was kind of done. And then I went back through, and there wasn't really anything imaginative about it. To someone's point, it wasn't generating something new and profound. It was just sort of, I didn't want to sit there and write, for a couple of days an FFI binding that was done in, basically 30 minutes of context building and then 10 minutes of generation. And then I swept back through and made the corrections, which I didn't need me to, I didn't really need it to tell me how to make the corrections. I just didn't want to write all that stuff manually.
Just wanted to say that I agree with Juan that they are very different approaches, and I agree that generating code is not the most important one. And just wanted to add that the process of reading and even the process of writing supports the process of learning. So I understand your example, Hernan, about proposing a better way to write things, a snippet, like you said, select blah, blah, blah. But then I don't see how these tools can support the learning at a higher level, like on the design level, because let's suppose you are a student. First, we should distinguish between the target. It's not the same a student or a newcomer, a newbie, than an experienced small talker. I mean, the kind of aid that they will need will differ for sure. But let's suppose you are talking about students. How can these tools can help them think better in terms of the design rather than just proposing this kind of refactorings, smart tweaks? Okay.
I think that's a very relevant question, and I also think that if we train LLMs with a code base, they may become useful for perhaps explaining that code base. But in order to raise them to the level of design, we would need to find ways to train them with design ideas and not just code.
Well, I did that experiment. I took a code, the Mars rover Kata, maybe you know it. It's the really bad, with a really bad design, all ifs everywhere. And I asked ChatGPT if he could, or she could change it and make it better. And it changed it. And it made a better design with states and polymorphism and so on. So I don't know if it's going to help you to think about ideas that you don't have or that you don't propose to AI, but it can help you when your code is bad and it's coupled, or it has 10 parameters or 20 instance variables, and those kind of things that any good programmer should know, but sometimes, for some reason, some programmers don't.
So
don't know.
it will be kind of a smart lint.
That's right. It would say, you know what? Here you have 10 instance variables. It's not a good idea. Why don't you break this and blah blah blah? So it does that, and I'm not saying that it's a great, the best solution, but as Seth said, it makes you think. It shows you different ideas, and you can reflect on that and take decisions. Make decisions.
Well, I have a question for you then. What you are suggesting sounds a little bit like using the AI to suggest heuristics for detecting issues in code and maybe fire a refactoring engine to fix them. So do you envision the AI to generate the code or to call a refactoring engine?
Okay, I pass the microphone to Seth.
Well, AI refactoring is in my list, so.
I guess I'll bubble back up. So I think AI, there's this discussion of, new ideas and sort of this profound, paradigmatic shifts. I don't think AI should. I think again, it's a tool. It's a tool to help you think, but the humans are coming up with those. They just need ways to absorb, existing ideas. And so back to the notebook LM. I mean, the power of that's hard for me to articulate here before you. But if you use it and you bring together lots of information and have it described to you conversationally, that's a new thinking tool. It's as subtle as the reason I still write things down physically, because when I type, it doesn't make it to my brain as well. So I still, when I'm in meetings and everything else, I still write by, I've got a remarkable tablet that I just basically am scratching the notes. And do I ever refer back to them? Not usually. But the fact is, when I write it, it makes it into here. And so that's a thinking tool. It's subtle. And so like the notebook LM piece, and I think I'm using that example because I thought it was a really interesting thinking technique. But there'll be lots of others that will come out. And so again, I see a tool, something that helps us think, bring together lots of information in a single stream of consciousness, and then it's up to us to use that as a tool to do new and profound things. But if the discussion is, can AI be that autonomous entity that's doing the profound stuff as we follow, I wouldn't think that would be the correct way to think about it.
I would like to ask the audience, because just raise your hand. No? Not, if you use any sort of AI on, I would say, on a daily, weekly basis. Okay, and this is the second question is, raise the hands, those that cannot think of not using that after using it. Okay. Yep.
I want to say something about his question. The example I gave, I mean, the refactoring proposed by ChatGPT was good, but it was not the best one. So it's not something, like he said, it's not something that I will let AI or ChatGPT or whatever, how we want to call it, make the changes, but read it and think about those changes and the proposal, and maybe it will fire some ideas on your head and design. So, yeah.
I would like to, before I jump to other topics, well, everything is kind of interweaved, but if anybody has a question, we can just pass the mic.
Elliot has a question, but I don't think it's a good AI idea.
Yes.
Just two observations. So one observation is that in terms of generating templates, it's a fabulous tool. A friend let me use his ChatGPT to generate some C templates, and it did 90% of the work. And so the obvious thing is to have it learn the patterns. If you've ever taken a copy of a class that has a pattern and renamed the class in an editor and renamed all of the selectors, it can do like that for you, right? So that works. But then the other is
very well. Yeah.
okay. So, but then all right. Oh, these microphones are so wonderful. Hi, lovely microphone. The other thing is the if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so in terms of culturally insisting on this thing being a tool and never allowing it to become a crutch, because one of the things that happens with ChatGPT is it only has syntactic understanding, doesn't have understanding of like the pragmatics of an architecture in terms of its performance, etc. Right? So it's a very surface understanding, and we just have to be as we're building tools, make sure that we keep it in its place. Right.
Okay, and the question is? Just kidding.
Maybe to add something to the discussion, I usually use AI in two ways. One is when I don't know anything about a topic, usually it points me in the right direction. I had to learn Ruby lately, and it helped me a lot. It made me way faster for the learning process. And the other way is with code. Usually I can have a discussion with it. It's usually like a review, and it doesn't generate the refactor for me, but hey, criticize this for me, and then I have a discussion with it, and usually achieve generally a better code in some ways. So I like it in general, that way of thinking. Is I can have a discussion with my code and use that as a review process. Not necessarily for it to generate the whole code or to only criticize and generate factors, but you can pinpoint which places you wanted to focus on. And you can have the whole code as a context or just a snippet, and it works in both ways in general. I don't know your thoughts on that.
That maybe we can kickstart another thing that I had. Is basically this rubber duck debugging technique. You know, if you know that debugging technique, you have a rubber duck and you talk to the rubber ducks just to basically verbalize your chain
Never
of thought.
done that.
And suddenly you find the answer, and the rubber duck never. So basically it was you, or how many times did you write an email to the mailing list, and by the end of writing it, you just found the solution, and you never send the email. It happens a lot. And this is, we small talkers in the early days, we kind of invented this thing of pair programming. And now, do you see that with this thing, you don't need to do pair programming anymore? Because maybe you have somebody that's actually looking at the code in real time.
I don't have an answer for that, but I think we can say that perhaps ChatGPT or an LLM may be better than a rubber duck, but does it make sense to use a real person as a partner for that and discuss with someone else who can have real ideas?
Yeah, but maybe it's not we are replacing it, but it's just like a low-cost alternative for certain tasks. I mean, we know that we don't all the time do pair programming. We sometimes sit together remotely or in the same desk and just crack some problem, but sometimes it's useful to have. It's my opinion. I shouldn't put my opinion here.
No, the good thing about ChatGPT or whatever you're talking about AI or discussing is that he understands you, and it changes, you know, and it looks like it agrees with you. It's not like discussing with you, that you never agree with me, you know. So I like ChatGPT better.
Yeah,
for those things. Yeah.
yes. You can tell it is wrong even when it's right, and he will
That's
say,
right.
"Oh, sorry, I'm
That's
wrong."
right. And with him, worst. No. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts? Or I can move. Well, this is something that you just actually laid out when you were mentioning. It's like there's in the Smalltalk, there are most of the systems I know are large. They've been running for years or decades. There's a lot of knowledge embedded into that. How do you see we can actually leverage that history of a running system, of a class library, on all the relations that are there, like legacy system, legacy code bases, like, I don't know, like a code repository that has 20, 25 years old? How you see that as a benefit to Smalltalk in general, how we can leverage that in our own profit?
Yeah, so, I mean, at instantiations, our customers typically have very, very large systems. They've been running for, there's 10, 15 years, maybe even longer. And so there's a tremendous amount of data and history behind not just the system itself, but even video meetings that may have occurred, or just all the documentation, just emails. There's a whole chain of activity, and basically, and that can be used by certain AI knowledge-based systems to help to be captured and basically help those teams. And so I think what we'll see though is an issue, and this is where I think things are going. I think we are already seeing this a little bit, is that some of these folks, especially the ones we deal with, are not going to want to export this data out to ChatGPT. So we're on a path to have actually in some cases more smaller, more refined AI systems that do very specific things, specific modalities, and then they're all kind of brought together, and using I think the first generation RAG is sort of the first trying to RAG systems are to try to solve, the hallucination issue. But, I think it's moving really fast, and I think what we're going to see is more on-premise. We see like Apple, the on-device. We're going to have that. Now we'll continue to have the large LLMs as well. Power, we're going to figure that one out. There's a lot of discussion in the U.S. about nuclear and stuff. So it's all that. It's really fast moving, but that is going to be a huge value add, I believe, for these large systems, is to have AI helping to capture that knowledge over time is going to be invaluable.
I agree. To me, it's like the obvious use case to have a knowledge base and feed one of these things in order to gather insights from it, either a code base or a system, all the documentation, as you say. The question for me, and probably you, Juan, or the rest can help me, is how to present the tool, meaning that which is the best way to help the user in using these kind of tools. Because there is this chat-based UI, and I'm in doubt that this is the best way to go. But specifically going back to the Smalltalk environments, do you see any way to incorporate these kind of tools meaning that in a visual way?
I don't think the answer to that question is obvious or can be found quickly right now on the spot. No. But no, what I'm thinking is that in Smalltalk, in the Smalltalk 80s quick lineage that now includes Quiz and Faro, there is a very rich history of how code evolved, okay? And each Smalltalk system can hold previous versions of methods, but only previous versions of methods and not previous versions of classes, or a high-level overview of how code was refactoring into different classes, methods, and different object graphs to perform the same feature with perhaps better flexibility or design or whatever. So we have some isolated, fine-grained tools to go back in time, method versions. If we use Monticello in Squeak, we can go to previous versions of packages or go through the update stream to which previous update modify this code. I do that from time to time in Quiz when I need something that is not in older versions because it was, for instance, a class that was removed. I would do a grep, a file system, an operating system level grep on the folder that holds all the updates, the numbered updates, to find the history of this idea, and then trying to find a proper prompt for grep that points me to the change sets that are relevant. So it doesn't work very well, okay? And on top of that, some projects are hosted on Git repositories that has its own way of holding history that is not easy to integrate with the others. So we have a huge mess of the history of the code there. And at some time, there has been effort to load all that history into some kind of database to be able to query it, but those efforts have never been complete enough to be comprehensive. So, and of course, time is an extra dimension, so it's an extra level of complexity. At the same time, we are trying to reduce complexity by removing all the stuff that is non-essential. We want to add the extra dimension of complexity that is evolution over time. So, do we want more complexity or less? So, maybe a useful way of approaching this is that we may want and hope to understand snapshots and have an AI help us relate one snapshot with the other. So I would love an AI that I can train on the whole history of Smalltalk code since Smalltalk 80 and use a conversational, a chat interface to say, what can you tell me about this? How did this evolve? And it's not just a textual symbol search, but a more complex one. Hopefully it can understand refactorings and reorganization of code graphs. And it can point me, okay, you need to take a look. This is relevant. In 1998, Tim Rowledge worked on this. Go look there. So going on the history, maybe a couple of clicks on a web browser, because it can point to web resources where the code is stored, no longer in my image, and help me understand the history of a piece of code I'm interested in. I see value there because that level of complexity is clearly way beyond what a developer can hold in their head.
Well, just we are jumping back topics here, but that basically goes to some sort of documentation. But you can't, let's say, you can train not just on the code, but also if you want to talk Smalltalk 80, you can train on the purple book, the blue book, and everything, and they will basically get the context of some decisions.
Totally.
It's like, see it as again, as a replacement for documentation. I mean, do we need, let's suppose we are maybe at the step we are now, but even if you look for the documentation of some AI system like Llama or ChatGPT, as a developer, there's how to use the API, but there's not a lot. I mean, if you look for documentation, maybe Anthropic for the cloud model, they have documentation. The others, they don't have much. And do you see this kind of tooling where you can ask about the history of the code or how it evolved or anything as a replacement for human written documentation?
No, not at all. What I'm suggesting is an automated tool that can suggest interesting snapshot for me to study. It can also diff them in a smart way, better than a text differ at higher level, and point me to the stuff I need to understand. But I don't want it to replace me understanding it.
Anybody wants to add something on that?
Yeah, so I'd basically just say I 100% agree with that, and that's why some of our goals are really in line with that in terms of we're looking at it from okay, you have an existing team that's built up a lot of architectural knowledge and domain experience on a very, very large system. And now that team, the system lives long enough because it's critical to the backbone of various companies that it's going to outlive the teams in terms of aging out or retirement, not necessarily, they die or something, but although that could be the case. And so new folks are going to come in, and those folks, there's going to be an incredible software archaeology activity that could take years. It could be never. It could be we can't, because there's so many orthogonal things that we can't bring together. We don't understand what the magic number 12 means here. Like, I need help. Like, do you have various? It's going to be good at those kinds of things to maybe be able to bring together, rationale possibly if it gets good enough. And basically the whole goal is to help the new teams coming in get up to speed as quickly as possible on these large systems. And so that's one of the goals that we see as being really important, is like, how do we enable and empower new teams that come in to get up to speed on some of these very large and mission critical systems that just have a tremendous amount of history to them.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to add that there's a great paper of Peter Naur called Programming as a Theory Building, where he explains, all these ideas that we have, the theory behind the solution that is not written in the code, but that the people have. And if we could have a tool that could recreate that theory, like you said, in the history, or to understand the system a little better, that would be great. I think we should stop reading Peter Naur after that.
Well, and that leads into needing really multiple kinds of systems. There's the code base, there's meetings, there's documentation, significant positions from companies and sort of the output of that in email chains or whatever. Whatever you can imagine is coming along with the code itself. Being able to bring that together would help with this endeavor, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm just adding, but it's like we are not thinking as with stack traces as a training input. because if you can use the time dimension, you can have more data just to see if there is a stack trace something, and then because there are like error handling, like global error handling software now that works as a software as a service thing that they are doing machine learning. I don't know if it's LLM exactly, but it's on the stack trace. Basically, just to interpret it and just provide like, okay, this might be an issue with the connection driver. And then basically hint you to save you time just exploring what might be wrong. Because sometimes you look at there and you don't know what's wrong. And we have a very powerful debugger. Most of our experience is debugger-centric, at least for most of us. And do you see, other than code completion, have you thought about having like an AI, not driven, but like just having the AI integrated into the debugger as a tool? After drinking?
I am. I'm sorry, Esteban, but
This panel should happen after the social dinner. It will be more fun.
I apologize, but I will jump back before your question. I comment on what Seth and Hernan said. I suggested using AI to study the history of code. Then Seth suggested doing the same with the history of the documentation and the proceedings of a large project. And then Hernan said doing that even with theory building. And I think these are three different levels of the demand on the AI system, and each one is much harder than the previous one. So who knows how far we can get in that ladder, right? It's intriguing. I don't know, perhaps we should start with history of code. That seems so much easier.
So I'll just give, just from our, so I bought our fintech team a 4090 to basically, there was a large history of meetings from, I think 10 years worth of meetings or something like that, that basically we used Whisper on to go through and basically get the text from the meeting, but also have it be indexable as well. So if new folks came on and say, yeah, I want to learn about this, it could actually index into the appropriate place at the meeting, at the various meetings. And so you can imagine, if you're able, because, the AI systems, is so much of it is about garbage in, garbage out. I mean, what's the data look like that's coming in? It's in the appropriate format, so the AI system's going to actually be able to make use of it appropriately. So for things like meetings, I mean, you could hand it a raw video, but that's probably not the best. So pre-processing, figuring out how to pre-process these different sources of information appropriately so they can be ingested into an AI system and subsequently used is also going to be a big task.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you mentioned before about...
What about your question about debugging and AI?
My question? Oh, you want to answer that? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I want some debate.
Juan
I want this to...
Juan hijacked the
We're not
moderator.
debating. We're all agreeing. So
I asked a question.
I'm going to say, yes, that's going to be possible. And, I think in 2 weeks, we're going to have an agent AI that is going to debug for us. What do you say, Juan?
you are making fun of me, and that is okay.
That's because you don't agree with him when you do pair programming. That's it's coming up.
That's why it's interesting. If you agree on everything with someone, it gets too boring. So there must be some friction for a couple to work, right? With respect to debugging, that's a completely different topic, of course. I don't know. I think it's something that is worth experimenting with, but I don't have enough in my mind to build an expectation on that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm coming asking this in particular for Hernan, that is a teacher. Do you see this? I mean, the use with Smalltalk. We are always talking in the context of Smalltalk as to help. Well, this is teaching Smalltalk and also teaching people to use Smalltalk, maybe existing programmers, as I don't know, as some way of tutor that you can have integrated into the learning experience of Smalltalk?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it can help. But again, there is a problem with that, and the same problem we have with books right now, because everybody can write a book and say anything that is completely wrong. So, when I have students coming and asking me, "Oh, what book should I read to learn object-oriented programming?" So I said, there is no book. There's no one book. You have to read this one, that one, that one, that one. And that one says stupid things. The other one, you have to read it to know what, and those kind of things. So the problem of having that kind of agent or helper is that if you do not question what it's saying, and you take what it says as the truth, then it could be a problem. So that's the maybe something that I'm not sure about, because students they need the right answer. They're looking for the right answer. It's not, you cannot ask them, well, it depends, because they are looking for the right answer to start building their own experience and their own solutions. And so if you give it and they will take as right an answer from, if they take as the correct answer, an answer from ChatGPT, and they don't question it, it could be a problem. So I'm not sure about for newbies, for people that is starting to learn Smalltalk. I don't know if it's a good idea. It could help, but it could also warm. Yeah.
Same as you mentioned with the books, AI may get it wrong, and the books also may get it wrong. So they should, as a student, you should start understanding that not everything anyone, an AI, a book, or a person says is true. You should have to double check it sometimes, and that's part of the learning process. So I kind of agree with Esteban here. I like the idea, especially when you're starting learning. You learn the most when you make a mistake, and you have to learn how to fix it, because it's not a simple exercise. You have to go to a stack trace. In worst cases, it's a plain text stack trace. In Smalltalk, you have a very rich stack trace with a lot of information. And that as a learning tool, and when you have to learn from it, I found it, in general, very useful.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is that, for example, let's say if you ask Chat what are the best design heuristics, for GPT will say solid principles. The solid principles, you have to follow the solid principles, and that's, I'm sorry about the word, bullshit. Okay? Solid principles, are not solid, and they're not the ones that you want to apply at the beginning. So that's the problem I see. When sometimes you have to think out of the box, or you have to think in a different way to get better solutions of what the common, most of the people do, because they just follow the crowd. And that's the kind of thinking that if you just believe what ChatGPT tells you, maybe you won't have. But that's critical thinking, and yeah, of course, that's something that everybody should try to have and push and so on. So, I don't know.
Just a quick comment, and this problem with using ChatGPT for learning, or as you said, books or videos that is so common right now, is that sometimes when you are learning something, always when you are doing anything, you are on a specific standpoint and having a specific point of view of what you are doing. And that's why a teacher is so important and sometimes absolutely indispensable. A teacher can guess and try to understand what the student's point of view on something is, and give them the hint they need to go in a certain direction. And that can only be done today by a human teacher. And of course, it will never be done by a book. I doubt if it will ever be done by an AI. So and that's important. In different states of your mind, you may need different kinds of hints to go in a good direction.
Yeah, we have a question, and then we'll have a wrap up just to.
What makes you think that the teacher will be right? What is the reason?
He's a teacher.
Why? Because I've read a lot of books by teachers and saw a lot of videos by teachers, and they are wrong more than once.
Yes.
Um,
You have to
My
pass the
point is
baton.
not that the teacher is right. A book or a video done by a book or a video written or made by a teacher is completely different from a teacher. The value I see in the teacher is that the teacher is trying to understand what the student is thinking and give a hint, not give the right answer. So to tell the student, walk in this direction or walk in that direction, it may be useful. It's not a right answer at all.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is that, we used to take books or as a truth, and sometimes we don't question them. So with the number of books we have right now, with the number of posts we have right now about, how you have to code, how you have to design, critical thinking is really important. So, yeah, it's not. You're right. You're right. I mean, a person can also lead you in the wrong way. You're right. So I think and also I believe that what Juan said is correct. So I think critical thinking is, something we should not lose and should improve on.
There are good teachers, bad teachers, and good teachers in a good day and good teachers in a bad day, of course.
What I am. Don't answer that.
Cheers. Okay, just we'll go in order from there to here. We've been basically just going around speaking like ideas, like as we call drunk talk about this particular topic with some good insights. But your area of influence, basically, as Smalltalk developers, you develop an IDE. Besides your work, you develop Smalltalk. You are a teacher and also develop, and you're the president of a commercial vendor of Smalltalk. What are your plans with AI related with the Smalltalk?
No plans at all. I will ask ChatGPT about that. No, to me is, again, something that we should pay attention. I still don't know how to include that in an IDE, for instance. It goes down to the basic question or the basic thing, which is whether these kind of tools can help us in thinking and learning or reduce that chance, right? And to me, it's important to clearly define how to present that in a way that really supports thinking, supports learning. And something that we didn't mention before is enjoying, because the other important thing about development activity is that is a pleasant activity, it's a pleasure, right? So given the activity that gives me pleasure to another machine is something that I don't want to do, for sure. So, and the pleasure of learning, understanding, and all those activities, how to match them with a tool, an AI, a model, or whatever agent. It's an open question to me, the way how to present it.
Before talking about this, I want to ask you a quick
You
question.
keep changing topics.
No. Will you ask us about the downsides and risk of this?
Yes, of course.
Okay, then I will speak about that at that time. And the topic now is plans. Okay, yeah. Well, I think that the Smalltalk community, the bigger Smalltalk community, we'll have plans. There, of course, there is no central planning, but the plans, if that exists, will be the result of of getting together the plans or the activities that everyone will be doing. And I think the Smalltalk community needs a kind of plan, or at least needs to develop activities in this regard. So what I will say about my personal plans is limited to my position as the maintainer of a core Smalltalk image. Okay, in the case of quiz, the objective of quiz is to enable experimentation, but to be minimalistic. So the main criteria of what gets included in quiz is the fundamental tools that a Smalltalker needs. Okay, so anything that is not a fundamental tool that a Smalltalker needs is not part of the core image, but it's to be developed as optional package code that can be loaded in quiz. I'm so auto-referential because that's what you asked. And with these possibilities for AI that we have been exploring today, is still an open question whether they are fundamental tools for Smalltalk developers or not. So I think at this time, what a core small image like this should do is to help people experimenting and being an enabler for those things to happen. Perhaps adding, as we usually do, some little hooks in the base image to make their life easier, but not adding the whole complexity of their experimentation in the base image. And time will tell.
So yeah, I think I said it before, but a tool to help students to learn, us to teach, and using the support that Juan is going to put in the image for AI.
For instantiations, as I said, it's augment the human endeavor, not replace it. That means, and specifically for the kind of systems we support, that means enabling those teams to be able to have, appropriate tooling to maintain a knowledge of that system over time. Because as we know from, these really large systems, it's a lot like juggling. You try to keep all the balls up in the air, and if you get enough folks who are the ones who know these systems and they leave, a ball drops, and you're not going to get it back. And that's very dangerous. It's a high-risk place to be. So we want to enable that. We want to find new ways. We're currently doing a lot of discoveries. So R&D activity, really asking, we have a number of questions we're asking. We think this has value, but does it? And so we're working with some partners of ours who are we've got a few of them that are deep into AI in Research Triangle, where we're at in Raleigh there, who are helping us answer these questions. And we're prepared for the answer to be, this is a terrible idea, or this is a good idea, but it's going to be about 5 years until you will even have the kinds of systems that could do this, or whatever the case may be. We want to first do our due diligence on understanding the value behind these and really the value for our customers. And so that'll be a conversation with them as well. And then we'll see. But it's definitely a time of investment, and we certainly see there's a lot of value in it.
You pointed out about the risks of this or downsides. Do you see any downside to not adopting this, or the risk of doing it wrong, maybe? Yeah, anybody can answer this. It's an open question.
Have you seen Terminator?
Yeah, people are afraid of the machines taking over the world. That's not what I.
That's an old thing.
It's maybe it's worth worrying about that too, but in the near term, for the kind of things that we are talking today, I see two risks that were briefly mentioned already, and one of them is leading people, especially inexperienced people who are learning, leading them to believe that the answers they will get from a fuzzy system, not a formalized system, are true, when we all people know they are not. So we, as we build these tools, we need to make it apparent that the answer is just a hint and not a truth. And the other risk that I see that I think it's even worse, it's a real risk I see here, is that this may lead some people, and some people may be the majority of younger people, to believe that understanding is no longer necessary. That's what I am afraid of.
Any other things? Yes, just your insight.
Totally agree with Juan. That is a risk. And again, as I believe that we should include somehow these tools, the problem is again how to set clear that the thing can say bullshit, right? So
Hallucinate.
I'm interested. Yeah, well,
That's the
interested in the ways to show that to the user. That's my interest.
Okay, we have a few minutes before the break, so we're open to questions, if any. Well, if there are no questions, which, okay. He's saying hi.
I have some answers. You ask us how you can implement on an easy way on an IDE without using chat and AI. You can use just a UI item that we have today, that it's a menu item. You select some code and just say, comment this code, and it will comment it. And it will be quite right if you embedded your framework on any LLM you're using, including Llama 2. And it's open source and you can use it locally. So it's quite easy. Or make the tests for this class. And it will work also. So that's an easy way to implement it. I have a question. What do you think the rest of the industry is doing wrong right now? Because they are all going to AI tools. And we are still thinking if it's valuable to our users. What do you think they are doing wrong right now, and why we don't accept that they are doing the right thing, or at least go there, because we are slow. We know that. We are a small community in the whole world, and if we don't decide, if we don't make the decision right now, probably they are going to leave us behind if we are wrong.
I just want to say, I don't think the other guys are doing the wrong thing, not at all. They are researching, and I think we should be doing that. Yeah.
I cannot say I know what the industry is doing in detail enough to do a critic. What I can say is that the general propaganda does the same as it always does. What they did with object-oriented programming, and what they did with the web, and what they did with each web technology and whatever, that is to try to be the first one to come with what everybody will want, even if they have no clue. So they make hype, and the marketing people get in the middle and try to build brands and concepts that are hollow usually. So that's something that the industry usually does wrong, and is doing perhaps wrong this time too. So, and we small talkers tend not to do that, and for not doing that, we are left behind sometimes. And I don't have a solution for that.
I agree. I started saying that even when this might be a hype, as Esteban mentioned before, we should pay attention. We should include it in this IDE that I developed. I already included this kind of menu options that essentially prevents the user from entering a prompt and thinking how to prompt something when you, you know what you are asking for. So, for instance, commenting code, categorizing, many tiny things. But my question was about a more general way to, as we were discussing here, for students or for people that want to reflect on a system, how to present that more than tiny things that these LLMs can do pretty good. And for sure, these kind of tools, like as you mentioned, commenting, explaining, improving, suggesting snippets, all these things should be included in an IDE. That's my opinion. Even for the sake of not being, I don't know, more isolated than we.
Seth?
I guess I'll just say from an industry perspective, what I've seen right now is a lot of fear and sort of risk as far as, so I see them in contracts. You know, are you using AI? You must let us know. Like we're seeing, and so there's the provider part, like, you know, everybody who's building the AI systems and all the money going into that. But then there's the, you know, enterprise users who are still just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Like, are they really, they're not going to export their data out to, you know, out to these big LLMs, and they're trying to figure out, and that's why I think, you know, the next phase of this whole thing is where we're headed is smaller, on-premise, on-device. That's a new direction that it'll have to go, because that's the only way you're going to get buy-in from these larger enterprises. They're not going to send all their data out to be chugged on by ChatGPT. So there's still just they're looking at it right now with a lot of just risk and sort of like what's going on here, and a little scared about it. So I think that will build the pressure to build more on-premise types of deployments. But not to suggest the large LLMs will go away. I think they'll always be there, and they'll have their utility.
Yeah, if at the search on Stack Overflow, they correlate with the launch of ChatGPT. Basically, they went down incredibly because you don't have to go search; you can just ask, and you can have like hallucinations. But as the models get better, and actually the newer one has, I was telling, I don't know who, even a Python interpreter. So basically, it can generate Python code, execute it, and tell you if it works or not. It's not just generating code. Basically, it delegates to an agent that runs the thing. So the feedback loop is going to get faster and faster. And we are, again, proud of our fast feedback loop. Maybe that's another thing where we should pay attention to, just to not lag behind. Any other question? If not, let's say bye with a big applause to these guys.